What's up, guys? This is Rey-Jay back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's happening with SPY, Tesla, and the broader markets. I'm going to talk about some key levels to watch for as time goes on, what's happening with the news involving the markets. Just know that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I'm saying as financial advice. So as far as the market's going right now, we're on a bit of a downtrend for SPY and the QQQ. As you can tell, we're making lower highs and lower lows. We have support right here at the 664 area at the 200 EMA, alongside the 666 range, which is where we had previous resistance becoming support. So I could see us dip a bit more on SPY, but I'm watching this area as our main support. We could be dipping a little bit more to test that. Then we're going to be watching to see if we get some kind of bounce to fill this gap afterwards. But there is still some downside risk on SPY and the QQQ. The QQQ also has potential to dip lower back down towards 605, and we're going to see if that holds. But overall, the market is still showing some weakness. So why is the market dipping? Since yesterday, we got our jobs numbers, and we had the highest amount of jobless claims that came out in about 4 years. And the overall unemployment rate came very close to 4.4%, according to data from the Chicago Fed and other sources. Now, much of this data is not being released due to the government shutdown, but some sources in the private sector are still being released. And this was not the best of news, at least for the markets. Today is going to be another important day because it's Friday, November 7th, 2025, the first Friday of November. And keep in mind that to start things off, we basically have the Michigan consumer sentiment data coming out at 10 o'clock a.m. We have the 5-year inflationary expectations and more data just like that. So look for some volatility 30 minutes after the stock market opens. And that's pretty much it, at least for our data. For today, as a reminder, we have quite a few option expirations. There's about a 3.14 puts to call option ratio and 677 is max pain, which makes me wonder, do we sort of like dip and then try to bounce as the day goes on? I'll be watching that very closely with all these option expirations. Hammock from the Fed came out and said that despite the fact that inflation is on an uptrend, she believes that the Fed is in no position to raise rates because of that. In fact, they should just prioritize the labor market instead, and that they have to be very careful with the way in which they go about things. So that's what's on the news right now. Elon Musk's pay package also got approved from shareholders. And then besides that, I'm not seeing anything else that's too crazy, at least on the news that I've been looking at. Just a few more things. We're also waiting on the government shutdown. There's going to be a very important vote from the Senate that's going to be coming out today. So we'll see what that leads to. Hopefully, they could get something to pass as soon as possible. And if they do get something to pass, that could be bullish for the market. So just keep that catalyst in mind. It could be affecting us later today, if not by tomorrow. And then finally, President Trump's tariffs are also being reviewed by the Supreme Court. There should be a ruling coming out very soon. So that's what we're seeing on the news. But overall, guys, I just want to say SPY and the QQQ still look a little bit weak. And I would not be surprised if we just continue to downtrend and we come close to that 666 to 664 area. And then once we touch that, we'll see if we bounce back up towards the end of the day with all the option expirations. But overall, there is still some downside risk towards these EMAs before we do attempt to see some sort of bounce. So keep that in mind, at least for now. Same thing with the QQQ. We're on a downtrend, making lower highs and lower lows. We could be dipping back down towards that 602 to 605 range. Then we'll see if we bounce back up towards 610. But overall, there is still some risk of downside looking at the current setups. On the IWM, we're coming down to fill this gap. We could be dipping a bit more towards like 237 to 235. Then we're going to see if we bounce back up towards the low 240s, and we'll see what happens after that. ES is also making lower highs here, and we have resistance at 67.66. So there is a risk of 66.80 to be our support, and we'll see if we bounce off that or not. So keep that in mind. NQ also is making lower highs right here, so it could be dipping back down towards 25,000 flats, if not 24,800, and we'll see if we bounce or not. But overall, the downside risk is still there. On Bitcoin, we're making lower highs. As you guys could tell, we have 100,000 as our support, and we're going to see if we bounce off this or not towards 102,500. So keep that in mind. Bitcoin is on a downtrend. Also, Tesla showing some weakness. We have this left shoulder, head and right shoulder. Although we like to hold support at 435, we're going to see if this holds this time around. But if anything, look for 440 on Tesla. We need to try to bounce off that. If we don't, 435 is likely coming next. Nvidia's on a downtrend. We're going to see if 185 holds. If it doesn't, I think there's another gap near 182. Let me just double check this. It's actually around, yep, 182 from my memory. I think we could be dipping a little bit more on Nvidia to fill this gap. Then there should be a bounce coming. Apple is also showing some weakness, at least on the daily time frame. On the 4 hour, I think we could be retesting 266, and we'll see if we bounce off that or not. Netflix is also consolidating. It could retest 1080, and we'll see if it bounces from there. Palantir is showing some weakness. It could be dipping towards the 170 flat area, if not 168, before it tries to bounce. AMD could be dipping back down towards this gap fill back down towards like 225 and then 218 for some temporary downside. Coinbase could also be dipping back down towards 285, so it's still looking bearish, no sign of a bounce yet. Amazon's also showing some weakness, could be dipping towards 238. Microsoft is on a downtrend, could be dipping towards 610 and then the low 600s. And Google's trading sideways, but there is an inverse head and shoulders like pattern forming, so we need to bounce off 282 for this to rebound. If we lose 282, we could be dipping more, so hopefully it tries to bounce here. Microsoft is also on a downtrend. We're going to see if we could hold around this 495 area, so we could bounce. If not, we could be dumping a lot more. Finally, the VIX has an inverse head and shoulders like pattern. We're going to see if we hold above 20 or not. If it holds this for close, this could climb a little bit more, and that would be another bearish signal. However, keep in mind that there's other catalysts affecting this market, such as the government shutdown, if it's about to come to an end or not, and also President Trump's tariffs, what kind of ruling we get from the Supreme Court. Overall, the market's on a downtrend, so to be prepared for more downside. But as we get close to our major supports from 664 to 666 on SPY and around 602 to 605 on the QQQ, watch and see if we could hold and bounce off those levels. That's going to be our next critical support zone. So be patient, guys. Be prepared for a bit more downside, and we'll see if we bounce. There are quite a few option expirations today, but once again, we're just going to follow the price action, be very unbiased with the way in which we go about things. All right, so with that being said, the number one thing I could really tell you is that you want to be very unbiased when it comes to the way the market moves, because this market it's just full of trickery. There's going to be a lot of moments where it tricks people into making certain moves. They like to trigger stops. There likes to be like liquidity grabs and just lots of traps out there for people. So be mindful of that. Always remember to manage risks. And with that being said, I'll be back very soon in a couple of hours with another video. So be prepared for some downside, guys. Do what you have to do, and I'll see you guys very soon on the next one. Thank you so much for listening, and peace out.